Welcome to Photoshop 1. This is Workspace and Tools. I will be talking a little bit about the interface for Photoshop. So what we're looking at here is we have Illustrator open, and I'm showing just the line art of it. So I want to remind you that Illustrator is a vector software. So everything is built within these lines. Whereas in Photoshop, it is pixelated dots. So if you look at it, it's these little squares that next to it create this smooth full image. Very different than what we have in Illustrator. So where Illustrator creates unique illustration to be able to be really large and really small without distortion. Photoshop, because it's these little pixels, when you work on it and you reduce the size, you're reducing the size of the image. So it will get to a point where you can't go very big or you can't go very small without distortion. You see this when you grab a low-res image from a Google image search and you want to make it into like a postcard or a flyer, and you begin to see the squares of the colors more and more defined, which means there isn't enough of them so that they create the illusion of a true form. So you have to be careful when using Photoshop to know how you should save the file and the resolution that is necessary to create the most ideal image quality. Remember, big is not the best. Photoshop and Illustrator's interface are pretty similar. As Illustrator has the menu we've talked about, the control panel, your panels for your workspace and your tools, and then your document center, Photoshop has it too. In Illustrator, we had the zoom tool, the hand tool, the direct select tool. We had a icon that was a T for the type, and so on and so on. So I'm not going to go through all of these. But you can see that there might be some that you're already familiar with by just looking at it. The icons are similar. We have the foreground and background color that you can also flip. And then we have the Move tool, which looks a little bit different, but it's still V for the Move tool, which allows you to move the image around or images around. So all those aspects are the same. We're going to talk about, next, let's talk about the history panel. So the history panel will record all of your movements when you have this file open and you're working on it, until I go to the beginning and select any tool or do anything. I have to make a move, and then it will delete the rest. So all your actions are recorded until you go back and start a new action. You will delete the ones that are in front of that action. So history is a great way to decide that you want to go back to the drawing board. Want to just undo? You can just do that through Edit, Undo, and Re-Undo. And those are just, so let's make some stuff. If I do Command Z, I can delete those. If I do Shift Command Z, I can bring them back. It only lets you go so far, and then you should just use the history to delete. So image and image size. So remember we talked a little bit about pixelation resolution. So this image is decided when you create it or when you take the photo what the image size is, and you can always find out what your image size is through image size. It tells you your image size, it tells you your dimension, and this is the original size. You can manipulate it, but be careful when you manipulate it that you do not distort your pixelation. So right now, all of these, the height, width, and the resolution are connected. So if I change my resolution, it will increase the height and width of my form. So it's just moving the percentages around. So if I need a really large image, If I go to 40 inches and 55, you can see that my resolution is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So this is now going to be a little pixelated. If I make sure this is going to be only 5 by 7, this is a very large resolution image for 5 by 7. So be careful about distorting this. If you do resampling, you could accidentally take this down to 200, changing the resolution and changing the size of the image. So you can see the image was 41.8 m and now it's 4.07 m. So it significantly reduced it when I adjusted the resolution by doing resampling. I'm going to cancel that because I don't want to change my resolution. Illustrator, you were able to change your canvas size, or they called it artboard. Image size, and I'm going to change this size, have it at inches so we can see this clearly, to +2. I'm adding 2 inches around. And then you can see how it's created more of the image. Not created the image, it's created more of the page or a canvas. So that is how you increase the canvas size. Reduce the size of the canvas. I can use these arrows to pinpoint where it's coming from. So I'm reducing the size of it from one direction of the width. Change this to inches. I'm going to make this 10. So it might cut off some of the image. So you can see that it took from this side because I directed the arrows to be on that side. Talking about canvas and changing the canvas size. Another way to change the page is using the crop tool. And it allows you to literally crop the image. It will affect the whole image. It will delete any extra image that you have. And up on your option bar, you can see that you have, I can click it so that it will cancel, and I can click it so that it will do it, and this will reset it. Want to crop it and hit OK. It will crop it, and then you'll see if I go to the move tool, which is V, that if I select the image in layers, I'm going to have to unlock it, that the image is cut out. The image doesn't exist outside of the page. So, whoops, I really didn't want that. I can always go back to the original using the history. So that's how you resize the image within the page. If I want to resize the image but keep the page the size it is, we can go to Edit, Transform, but we need to make sure we're always on the layer that we want to be transformed, and we have to make sure that that layer is unlocked. So I can go Edit and Free Transform, and now I can adjust the image, and the image is still there. And I can click to cancel or click to say yes. So now I still have the image, right? I can always come back and edit it. And I highly recommend in Photoshop, always allow yourself to continue to edit and adjust the image. Don't do anything harsh that you lose the image, because sometimes you want to go and nudge something over a little bit and you don't have it anymore if you've used the cropping tool. Remember, layer is really important aspect of Photoshop. You have to be on a layer to affect anything that you're doing. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the selection tools. So there's a few here that are available for selection. We have the marquee, we have a lasso, and this one is a wand and a quick select. Quick select is a new tool. I'm going to have a video for you that you can look over on your own time. This is extra. So the marquee has some options here. You can do two things with it. So with these tools, you can use them as a way of drawing out a form to create something from the photograph, like tracing it like we did in Illustrator. Or you can affect it and just do some photo editing on it using the selection of a certain area. So there's two premises. Editing or making can be done with these. So in Layer, all of your photos come in locked. So to unlock it, you can double click on it and it'll call up a new layer, because it's not quite a layer yet. It's just a form that's in the document. So we want to change this to photo. And we still want to lock it, because we don't want our original photo to ever be changed. So we're going to add a new layer with this little square and plus, which will add, this is our test of our selection. So I'm just going to put a test here. And I'm going to show you the marquee. So the marquee is one of the oldest tools that have been in Photoshop. And again, it's used to select an object or create forms. So let's use the elliptical circle to kind of see if we can trace this out. And I'm going to zoom in using Command. Remember, you can go minus and plus to zoom in. So you select it, and then you can select an area you think to start in. I'm going to go off just a little bit because it drags a little off. And then I can just move it a little bit. You can see already that it's not really adjustable. It's not lining up. It's not like the shapes where you can bring it from the center. Yes, you can make one. Ability to kind of change the form. It isn't a perfect circle. So it has its purpose. But for what we're doing of making forms, unless I just need to make a circle, it's a little limited. Make 3 circles to make this cactus. I just use Shift to continue to add the whole selection. Hopefully you've been noticing these little dots or lines shimmer. We call that dancing ants. We talk about these ants moving around the selection, and you know that there is a selection that's there. The thing about selections is if there is a selection, you are only affecting the selection. So if for some reason, if I had my photo unclicked and unlocked, I can affect this or move and adjust the original photo, which you don't want to do. I can also if I paint on it, it only goes to that edge. So I'm only affecting the object. So that's a nice thing. If you make a selection and you only want a very small piece to be edited and changed, you can select it and manipulate it on its own layer, just that selection. But be careful, I've been drawing on my original photo. We don't want to do that. So go to History. I'm going to go back a little. I'm going to go to Layers, and I'm going to make sure I'm on the test. And then I can talk about filling. So we can go to the eyedropper and select the green that we want. So this will always go to the foreground. And if I want the color to be in the background, which is important for this next move, I can use those arrows to move it. So this is the green that I selected with the eyedropper. And now I want to fill this in our test. I can do Command Delete. But I can fill it in with a shape. So if I no longer eventually wanted it and it was just a whole bunch of abstract shapes, I can do that. You can also add Fill, which is the menu, Edit, Fill, and it'll open up this dialog box where I can also choose a color. I can go the background or foreground, black, white, we're not talking about right now. So there's ways of filling it other than just making a selection here. So I hit OK, there we go. And then here I can use the bar to select the right colors I want, or I can actually add in. So if someone gave me an exact color that they want, I can actually put that in there. So from here, if I like this blue, I can hit OK, the color, and yes, OK the fill, it will fill it in. So that's how you can use this to make odd shapes. But if I wanted to start painting and I had a selection here, dancing away somewhere on your page, you're not going to be able to work or change or edit anything else on your page but that selection. All right, so we want to get rid of it, go back to the marquee. You have to go back to one of the selection tools to get rid of a selection. let's talk about lasso. So lasso has a few here. The traditional lasso, the polygon, and the magnet. Polygon is basically step by step. As you can see, it's only going to make geometric shape. It's not good at circles. So the lasso is great if I needed to do a very quick selection and it didn't have to be detailed oriented. Like I just want to get this selection here of this, I can just quickly grab it. But as you can see, unless I go into really detail, moving it close, as soon as I click off of it, it's going to want to close it. So you have to be very confident that you can outline it correctly. You can still use the minus to clean it up, but you have to be careful with it. And this might take more time to go back and forth. So what other tools are out there that we can do that might be better? So the magnet tool is nice. It will align to what it thinks you're trying to select. So it's doing a pretty good job selecting that black. But you have to be careful that you do select it or you're going to start selecting just random stuff. So I was able to select it very quickly and find the connection, and it made a selection. The magic wand is another one that I actually do like. I find that if it's a very clean and one solid color, the magic wand can do a really good selection. It also can do, you can now see here that it does a pretty good selection here, but now we're having a little difficulty with the lighter gray and the darker gray. But this might be an easy fix. Maybe you go to your marquee and just do that minus and make sure you get rid of it. So it's a combination of using a bunch of them. So I can, like all the others, add a new line and add a color to this. So I can I know that I'm going to do this color, or do I want to do the color that it is? If I do, I'm going to want to find my eyedropper and select the eyedropper section. And then rotate it, and now I can delete and fill it into one color. So that's how I can make shapes using these tools. Now let's talk about how maybe I can edit the original photo. So here I have made a shape here, and I filled it in with a color. But what I really want to do is just change this color of this gray background and make it a little bit darker. Again, I do not want to affect by drawing on top of my photo, but if I use these adjustment layers, which is also found here in the panel, there's a couple of these brightness levels. These all affect the quality of the image, either by color or brightness and contrast will affect the density of clarity, but make it something brighter or make something darker. So let's take a look at the brightness and contrast. So a level will come up here and you can see the icons. That selection has isolated itself on a layer for the brightness and contrast. So if I make a move, it's only affecting that little section. And if we go to our layer, we can now see that selection, that brightness. And I can go back and I can edit it anytime, which is also a nice aspect of it. Again, I'm not affecting the original. So you might want to look into those adjustment layers and see how you can play around with the color balance. Let's try one more, black and white, magnet. And I'm just going to go for this orange plant. It's a little hard because I'm going blind. I'm not being able to see, and it really likes to go rogue if you're not paying attention. Just a sleight of hand will make it go a different direction that you might not want it to go. And then I want to make sure I actually have it selected before I make another move. I did see that there was like this little circle that popped up that helped me understand that it's selected. See that circle that kind of came up? So hopefully that is the addition. And then we can minus too. So I can come back here and minus. So that circle came up again. That shows me. All right, so I now have a pretty good selection of this bottom of this vase. And if I just want to change it using any of the adjustments, I can just click below here and change it into black and white if I wanted to. And I can figure out what kind of black and white. So you can really affect and change the whole image very quickly just by using some of these adjustment layers. So there's my adjustment layer and what I had selected. So instead of a orange, we now have a bluish gray vase. You still have to go back and like kind of make sure your lines are really good when you do this. It's kind of affecting the edges. So when you use selections, you have to be pretty careful. So that's using selections and making shapes, and using selections and using which is your adjustment layers. Take some time, play around with these, kind of get used to them because it might be helpful for the next lesson. Down here, the selection tool, the shapes, the pen tool are all brought in from Illustrator. So we're not going to talk too much about it, but I do want you to know that any of these shapes are vector, that you can't erase and manipulate it, but it'll make sharp, clean shapes for you. So this would be good if you wanted to start creating a pattern in the background. And you can do that with this and just immediately change the colors if you have some templates or use some color presets that they have. You can also add and change it from here. You can add a stroke and add a size around the stroke. And let's look at our layers again. You can see that I've created some of these shapes, and you can go back and change them anytime you want, the color and the stroke. You can use the move tool and make them larger and smaller and move them around, but you have to make sure you're on the right layer. I can pull it from any of these anchor points and it will stay in the same percentage of that rectangle. It'll scale appropriately. If I hit shift, I can start changing its size, change and edit everything without having to delete and make a new one. I can change the color, I can put an outline on it. So play around with this and make some shapes and forms just so you get used to how to use this. It's a little bit different than Illustrator. You have to be on the move tool to move things around and adjust them. Again, if you want to distort it, you have to hit shift, which is the opposite. And one other thing I want to talk about is, so these are vectors, and if I want to change them from, see that little square, and I want to make them into a rastered image so that I could manipulate them. So if I want to manipulate this image, like draw in, erase in it, other than changing the shape's color or form, I need to change it into a rasterized image. And I can do that by selecting it and then going up to layer, and then I can hit rasterize shape. So I'm changing it one color system into those dots per inch. And you have to be careful of how that is affecting the form. So if I do shape, you can see now that that shape is no longer have that little square. It's no longer a vector. Now I can use the erase tool, which you are used to in Photoshop. And up here, you can see that the option bar has changed. Scale the eraser brush to different sizes that I need. So if I'm here, I can now play with it. See how if I was on any of these other ones, it would tell me that I would have to make it into a rasterized shape. So that's the difference. If you want to manipulate these shapes and change them, you have to change them in back into a rasterized image and not in a vector. So there's a lot we covered. Hopefully that will get you started about thinking about Photoshop and how to use layers a little bit. We talked about sizing. We talked about selection tool. We talked about using color. So this should get you to a place for the next project. Remember that I want to see how you use these tools, and that's a wrap.